Hello and welcome to this webinar, one in a series of webinars that we've held over the past few months. Thank you to support from the Department for Transport. We've held a series of webinars on the topic of safe and sustainable towns and cities. This webinar today is about engaging young people with this important topic of safe and sustainable travel. Today we have a series of speakers, so I'm going to give a brief introduction about BREAK and why we've been holding webinars. Then I will pass over to our Director of Communications and Campaigns here at BREAK, Gary Ray, who is going to talk about our Engaging Young People course that we've been delivering for a number of years, and a review that has just taken place thanks to funding from the Department for Transport. So this is a first time that this has been presented, and the findings of this report are being made available live to you first through this webinar, and then we will be sharing it externally after today. From there, I'll hand over to Jeremy, who's a watch manager with Merseyside Fire and Rescue. He's going to talk about work that he's done engaging young people and going out into schools and doing talks. And then I'm going to pass over to Anna from 20's Plenty for Us, who's going to talk about their campaign and the campaign work they do, and in particular communicating those key messages to a younger audience, and any similarities and differences really from that. So first of all, I'm just going to give you a brief introduction about working together for a safe and sustainable future. For many of you who've attended our webinars before, you'll recognise BREAK's vision. This is our vision where there are 0 road deaths and injuries, and people can get around in ways that are safe, sustainable, healthy, and fair. What this means is that we want people to be able to travel in ways that doesn't pose a threat to life or serious injury, and also in ways that don't contribute to pollution and global warming. We want people to be able to engage in active travel and get around in ways that contribute to health and well-being. And overall, this fourth area is fair. We want travel to be fair and enjoyable for all. We think children and adults should have the freedom to move around their communities through active means and to experience the world around them and get to places that they need to get to without fear, threat, risk to health or discomfort. So it all sounds very simple, but unfortunately the reality that we're in at the moment is that we currently live in an unsafe world. 1.2 million people were killed in the latest figures, and this is expected to rise to about 1.8 million by 2030. Road deaths are the 9th biggest killer globally, and the World Health Organization say they're expected to rise up the chart of killers to the 7th biggest in the next few years as well. So this is a massive issue, and something that we work globally with our colleagues to try and improve. In the developed world, about 1/3 of CO2 emissions are calculated by national emission agencies as due to transportation, the majority of which is road transport. So we know, unfortunately, that we're in an unsustainable situation where traffic is on the increase. We hear all the time about figures of more cars and more vehicles on our roads. So this is something that we need to work with to improve. And the true reality is that there's 300,000 people die annually from respiratory conditions directly attributed to motorised road transport pollution. So these are from gases including carbon monoxide, nitrogen oxide, and also the leading cause of obesity as well. And unfair, unfortunately, healthy travel isn't fair for everybody at the moment, and this is something we need to work on to make sure that everybody, whether young, old, poor, rich, everybody can get around in ways that are safe, sustainable and healthy, and that it shouldn't be a postcode lottery. So a little bit about our work. As many of you who've supported us for a while will know that we've been working in various ways. So we support road crash victims and have our support services to support those that have been bereaved or seriously injured in road crashes. And then everything else we do is to try and prevent those crashes happening in the first place. So we do this through our campaign work, which Gary will talk about and is our director of. And we try and inform road users and work with organisations and schools, so as well as road safety professionals through emergency services and schools, but we also work with fleets and at-work drivers to try and reduce those crashes. And obviously a massive part of this is young people. It's the biggest, road crashes is the biggest killer of young people, and this is why we work actively to try and communicate with this age group. And I know it's something that many of you listening in today are passionate about, to try and improve road safety for young people. So inevitably, hopefully in the future, we don't need our support services to support these families through this difficult time. So this is the situation we're in at the moment with regards to people getting around by car. Just some facts for you to try and take in and understand why we've been running these series of webinars, trying to communicate the important message about safe and sustainable travel. And even though most people associate brake as with road safety, sustainable is a massive part of this and something that we are working towards with our other organisations, and hopefully you can see the link there that actually this goes hand in hand and is such a big wider picture than just simply preventing crashes happening on the road. There is this wider picture of trying to encourage more people to take to our streets, and I know this is something Anna will talk about later with her 20 mile an hour campaign with regards to actually encouraging more people to get on their bike, get on their foot and actually take sustainable travel. So this is something that many of you, especially if you work in local authorities, have the can use these facts to just work out more widely, not just in your road safety teams, but obviously get your public health, get your other teams involved, because actually this is a bigger issue than just road safety. One of our main events, just a couple of plugs I'll give you. So Road Safety Week is 21st to the 27th of November 2016. And I think we are due to release shortly this week what our topic will be about road safety, and actually what Gary's going to talk about later will actually feed in nicely to what we'll be covering into in Road Safety Week, as he mentioned, about our Engaging Young People project and being based around our pledge, which is our big campaign that everybody can get involved with. So note date for your diary, and just keep an eye out really on more information that will be made available, and thank you to many of you who have supported us during Road Safety Weeks in the past, and hopefully you will get involved again this year. And just some of our other events that are coming up. Gary is going to talk about our Engaging Young People project and the review of that and changes that we've making for this year. So some of the courses that we are doing actually for people and road safety professionals to attend. If you've once you've heard Gary's presentation and would like to attend one of our courses, we've got 4 over the course of the year. If you're super keen and are in Scotland, then we do have a course tomorrow, and we do have a couple of places left if you did want to attend. If not, we're in Birmingham, London and Huddersfield, and the dates are on your screen. And as I mentioned, Road Safety Week 2016 is a great way for you to get involved. So thank you very much for listening to that brief introduction from myself, and I will hand over now to Gary Ray, who will be able to talk to you about our Engaging Young People project and the review that we have done thanks to funding from the Department for Transport. Thank you very much, Gary.
Well, thank you very much, David, for that introduction and that very thorough background. Good morning, everybody, and welcome from break from our headquarters. We're broadcasting live to you from Huddersfield in Yorkshire, and thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules. I've had a quick look through the delegate list, and you are clearly busy and influential people, so thank you for your time. This is surely the most difficult audience that any of us attempt to engage. Winning the hearts and minds of young people, changing behaviours and changing attitudes is something that I have to say, hands up as a comms person, we singularly fail at every attempt, and that's not just in my current role, that's in previous roles. If you bother to Google me, you'll see my previous attempts at engaging young people. So they're a tough audience, and rightly so. So it concentrates our minds here at Break as to why we have to work harder, be smarter at engaging these young people. So by way of background, some lessons, some observations, and some recommendations today. If we look back to 2003, 2004, we ran a quick pilot program across London. It involved training volunteers to deliver what we hope would be pretty powerful interactive sessions with some young people on road safety. That was evaluated by colleagues in Napier University. We refined the program, got some corporate sponsorship, we rolled it out across the UK, initially under something called the Road Safety Academy. Later that morphed into something called Too Young to Die. This program itself underwent some changes over the years, some development improvements, taking into account, as you should, evaluation, feedback from participants, emerging research, some best practice thinking, really, and we made some practical changes to that. So we are where we are today with the course marketed under the name Engaging Young People. Normally run 8 courses or so per year, training volunteers and professionals. I have to say largely emergency service, local authority, road safety practitioners, but also youth workers, educators, driving instructors, company managers, community leaders. You're listening to me today, I hope, and volunteers. So that's the history. I have to say one thing has not changed, and it is this. Really, our work remains the same, and it's this. It's to provide training, resources, and information. You can read that for yourself on the screen there. And it all in from a Break perspective to our road safety pledge that Dave hinted at earlier. So this is your exclusive first here of the evaluation report. This is a headline summary of those findings made possible by the Department for Transport, as Dave Nichols said earlier. The report itself was really about, I guess, about the process, if you will, of the evaluation of the project itself, not so much about the outcomes, and further research is needed on that. Let me just give you a little bit of context in terms of the scale of the operation. There's a big fat figure for you in terms of some of the young people that we've engaged in the past 12 months. Over a period of time, we are reaching, as our evaluation report has found, over 60,000 people. Now, that's not me boasting, we're just scratching the surface there, but I wanted participants today to have a feel and understanding of the scale of the operation thus far. So our report, really, which you will be able to see when it's actually finalised, we're still dotting I's and crossing T's, it's about the feedback, it's about some studies, it's about some expert insight from academics and research professionals, and it's certainly about recommendations and conclusions. And I've got some sort of big things at the end of this presentation that I'd like us to dwell on. So, as I said earlier, it's about looking at the process rather than the outcomes, how we've developed that in light of the feedback that we've already been receiving, not just in this piece of research, but over a number of years. And I think critically there, on that second bullet point, just develop a set of principles and recommendations that we can all use to refine the program, make it more relevant, make it even higher quality program. That's what we're about at Break, and I know that's what you're about in your organizations as well. Let me crack on. I don't want to take up that much of your time as we have two other excellent presenters this morning. So, who on earth is involved in this program? Who is engaging young people? What type of people are we speaking to who are then engaging these valuable young people? And not surprisingly here, look, most people who did the course, they had some prior knowledge of road safety. Of course they did, because often they're professionals working in what you would call the road safety industry. 65% rate their prior knowledge of road safety as high or very high. That's fantastic. And similarly, 3/4 had done at least some training on working with young people. 70% significantly worked with young people. But there's an interesting significant minority, I think, sort of 33% there, who had not. So that's a really interesting and challenging spread of expertise, if you will, for Break to consider. And our first learning point of this morning's presentation from me, it's precisely that. It's a diversity of experience and knowledge across participants. It's a really important thing for us to think about, and how we train the trainer, how we develop and style the programs, taking into account an absolutely massive knowledge base already. But also, how do we accommodate that 33% who have admitted, if you will, that they're not experts in, I suppose, talking with young people. So that's quite a challenge. Ploughing on. So this is an interesting one as well, in terms of why do some of us not always engage young people? What are the barriers there? And hey, Sherlock, no nonsense there. It's actually time. Time is one of those things that always gets in the way of everything. Now, that's hard for us to control, but certainly based on our understanding that not everyone trained through the courses goes on to deliver sessions with young people, we asked the respondents if they delivered any sessions with young people based on some of those principles. Now, 61% of respondents answered they had, and 39% answered that they had not. So when we actually probed some of the reasons for inactivity or lack of engagement, that most common response was about actually other time commitments, to be precise. 35% had other time commitments. And this is an interesting one. They also had difficulty, it was about 30% from memory, actually finding young people to work with. So for us, a couple of big learning points from that, just to really give you the headlines here. Now, look, that's hard for us to control in terms of other people's time commitments, and particularly while courses, as I'm saying on the screen there, are a paid-for service. But I think it does have implications for what we say before we actually start these courses. It's about the prep. Isn't it always about the prep? Finding young people is an interesting one for us, and we're experiencing that right now, and more of that later from me. But that does suggest some inactivity, as I'm saying there, might be addressed by giving help to delegates in arranging those first sessions. Who's a network? Who's in the network? Who's got direct and credible access to young people? Schools and colleges are my first lazy suggestion there. There's lots of other suggestions that perhaps we could learn from you, good people. So, time, finding the young people, always a consideration. Now, we had some really useful qualitative responses in further probing of this question, which we want to build on. Now, these included comments on the need for, I guess, greater insight into how behavior change is actually brought about. Some clarity about the flexibility for delegates who are delivering the course to actually adapt content to suit their local area. Discussions about possible impacts of crashes on young people who will be able to relate to that, such as life-changing injuries, not just talking about what is obviously a sudden and violent death. And also issues raised about follow-up contact from break as well, and that's a commitment from us that we need to look at in terms of our own resources. Given we're an organisation now that I think is 31 strong in terms of the number of staff that we have, people always think we're massively bigger than what we are, and that terrible cliche of fighting above our weight saying is, people think we've got hundreds of staff here in sunny Huddersfield in Yorkshire, and we haven't. So there's a real resource implication there in terms of how we actually follow up on some of these courses. Let me get off this learning point slide. I'm boring you with that. Now, this is interesting as well in terms of how we're engaging young people, how these people who are delivering these courses are taking it on. And the session design is absolutely critical for us here. Ideally, following compulsory education guidelines as well, the ideal size, of course, of any group, between 10 and 30 young people. That clearly, teaching grandmothers how to suck eggs on this webinar is about to enable more effective interaction. If not exactly one-to-one, then certainly something that is valuable in terms of response from the young people. Session design critically to cover our pledge. And the break pledge, and I hope you know it off by heart, covers those S's: slow, sober, silent, secure, sustainable, and what's that one I can't say that I meant to know off the top of my head? Sharp, of course. I always forget that. So lots of S's there, the 6 key pillars that make up the break pledge. Important that those are covered. And the thing that I will return to as well that's really important is about engaging young people through interaction, through group discussion, through activities, and through being a bit sharper, a bit cleverer with some of the materials that we're using as well. I touched on this earlier, helping young people understand the consequences of road crashes, not just death, but often life-changing injuries, and how we enable, I guess, young people to develop their own strategies, their own approaches. Strategies is too big a word, you know, common sense approaches to make sure that they and their mates and their loved ones stay safe as well. So, big learning point that came out of the research and will feature largely in the report. Again, might be stating the obvious there. Look at the size of the sessions, you know, that's getting big, we reckon, to enable full and accurate and proper interaction. I think we might look at that by re-emphasizing those guidelines, although we accept that's got an impact, as I say there, on the number of people reached. So something to think about in terms of the size of the course itself. Don't want to dwell too much on that, but less is more. But that's a real management challenge and a logistical challenge for us as well, because we want to reach more young people. So a dilemma, a learning point dilemma there for us. Let me just, if I may, spend a little bit of time on what I like to call the 6 pillars of wisdom that make up the pledge. I call it, and we call it lazily, the break pledge. It's everybody's pledge. Dave earlier was talking about the Road Safety Week theme this year, and our news release is going out, if my colleagues are on the job, this morning, revealing the theme. And then I can exclusively reveal to participants on the webinar today that the theme for Road Safety Week 2016 is Make the Pledge. We will be having a massive push on people making and sharing the break pledge. It's important to us, it's an important and has been an important part of the Engaging Young People program. I don't think that's going to change. There is nothing in the research that suggests we ought to change that. So of our 6 pledge strands, what we discovered is that not all are receiving the same attention. So those relating to speed, drink and drug driving, seatbelts, mobile phones, they're much more likely to be covered than the pledge points that relate to driver health and eyesight, the sharp one there with the big eye staring right at you. Now, that's probably understandable because younger drivers, younger people may not necessarily need the eye tests at the moment. So the omission of the sharp topic is perhaps understandable. However, that sustainable one with that big green footprint, and Dave mentioned this in terms of the remit of BRAVE, road safety and a sustainable transport charity. That's what we are. So the omission of that sustainable topic, which we found evidence of, is of concern, just because we reckon, given this is an important issue to young people themselves, it's an important issue generally to young people's road safety. And actually, it's one of the best ways young people can protect themselves and others. It's choosing other forms of transport. Let's not make the assumption that all young people are all young drivers. And part of what we're trying to do, I have to say, is to say, let's think again about how people get around, and not just young people for that matter. Let's encourage greater take-up of public transport. Let's encourage more walking and more cycling. So sustainable is a big gig for us, and we want to make something of it. It's an issue with significant long-term repercussions as well for young people's health, well-being, and finances. So it's possible that I reckon it's possible that this omission related to sustainable is possibly as well because we've added it quite recently to the BRAVE pledge. It's not one of the founding core pillars of the pledge, so that could be one explanation for it. But it's something that we would certainly wish to push. And we well understand that in terms of professional experiences, for example, the emergency services helping to deliver these focus on the fatal 4, which of course tally more obviously with some of those other S's that are on your screen right now. Now, let me be really honest and really clear to you today. There are limitations to what we can do to address this, but I think certainly we need to give more careful attention to that sustainable topic. I think we need to look again at how we talk about that in the courses in light of the profile of the people taking those courses. So food for thought there around the pledge. And by the way, if you've not yet taken the pledge, I would encourage you to do so because it's on our website and it's painless. That's just a summary of what I've said, and probably should have kicked off a little bit earlier with that particular slide. But there's just a percentage in there just to reinforce my point in terms of how we focus on each of those particular strands. So I'll let you dwell on that for one final moment. I think I've hammered that point too much. But it's a learning point for us to consider, as all the other learning points are as well. Now, a graph. I don't like graphs, but I thought I'd better put one in just to sort of prove that we've done this properly. And it's about how we engage, how we train and teach, the methodology, the pedagogy in terms of delivery to young people. And it's really quite obvious there, the second deeply purple graph, helping them understand consequences of road crashes, massively high percentage figure of 96% there. Fine, that's great, but I would just draw your attention to the third graph along the screen there, games and interactive activities. And this is my big point as a comms person. I think we in Break, me heading that team, and our corporate sponsors and my other colleagues need to be more creative. We need to be on the ball in terms of how we attract the interest of young people. And those figures are languishing around the 40-ish percent, 45, 47% area. They need to be, I would suggest, colleagues, much higher in terms of the creative approach to delivering messages. What would switch a young person on? What devices, what interactives, what videos ought we be using? And I think there's scope there to make a much bigger deal of that. And let me capture that on the learning point here. Learning points plural. So greater provision of visual, interactive stuff really is needed. And some of the feedback we've had, and this is certainly some of the video content that we provide as part of these courses, and other video content from other sources is also used. It's about a 60-40 split, I think, from memory, between Break content and other content on video. I am not happy, let me be, again, really honest with you, I'm not happy with the video content generally that Break's got at the moment. I think it needs to be, as I'm hinting at there in that video section, shorter, more up-to-date, snappier, punchier, more creative. I think that's a neat summary. That's what we have to do. Not least because it also, without contradicting myself, sometimes needs to be a little bit more nuanced as well in the messages. That extreme behavior point there in the video paragraph, yes, that is impactful. It's also relatively rare. I want to talk about other situations. I want to talk about where people have had near misses. I want to talk about people who have sustained, as I mentioned before, serious injuries. So a little bit more nuanced, but actually in terms of the technical production of videos, we just need to be that bit cleverer and that bit sharper. The thing about PowerPoint, and I'm not a lover of it, let me just declare an interest here. I really, frankly, detest it, and I suspect at this point you're also waning PowerPoint. But, you know, we don't suggest PowerPoint is used, by the way, in these programs, but actually 83% of people who are delivering the programs choose the PowerPoint method, the channel of PowerPoint. I think that's really interesting, and I lob this in as a thought, which is Gary Ray's thought, not from the research. I wonder if that's a default position, because maybe some of the other channels, some of the other platforms are just not sharp enough, creative enough, or perhaps we're a little bit reticent ourselves to use those. Well, can we take live feeds from Facebook and Twitter? You know, can we get a Twitter storm brewing through some of these courses? All of that, I think, is up for discussion, debate, and I think it's worth saying that PowerPoint is, I think, the backbone of many a presentation, as you witnessed today. I'm not sure it's the way of delivering a message. That's a bit of a personal intervention from me. Shoot me down, if you will, but yeah, let's leave that there. But listen, I'm being hard on ourselves, on myself, because that's how I work. But guess what? The vast majority of people who we surveyed, who deliver these courses, said they found the course useful, really useful actually, in terms of equipping them with the road safety knowledge and skills to get out there and go do the stuff. Look at those percentages. Useful, 35% in terms of road safety knowledge, 47% delivering activities, 41% in initiating and managing discussions. Now, let's be a bit of a spin doctor here and add the useful and very useful together when you've got some big figures there. I don't want to sound complacent. There is a massive room for improvement there, and we need to work on that, which is why we're having this presentation today and why we'll be having further discussions in-house about it. Can I just quickly now, before we move on to our next speaker, talk about some, if I may, of the wider lessons. And this really is my summary from what is a very long report still in production. And I've touched on some of the things already. Let's just quickly work, if I may, through those bullet points. So what I call support at the sharp end, look, whoever's delivering this stuff really, and I want to say this really explicitly, should be supported on an ongoing basis. They've got to have up-to-date resources. They've got to have that information and guidance to maintain the highest possible standards. That's what young people deserve, and that's what they demand. Now, local knowledge. The specifics, I hinted at this before, the specifics of the local area, local case studies really do add weight and power to any session. So it might be especially valuable to link up local experience and perspectives with some wider perspectives and expertise. We think that will really help aid efficiency. Interaction, interactive, really important for us, maintaining engagement and interest, enabling young people to relate, develop realistic strategies for themselves and others to keep safe. I touched on visual and multimedia aids to, I guess, maintain engagement, maintain interest, support interaction. So I could have called that bullet point, let's be a bit more creative, to be quite honest with you. Relatable. And I guess what I'm trying to say here is just about case studies. Young people, so again, we need to be in a place where young people can actually imagine it happening to them or their friends. I guess to enable young people to anticipate the regret that they would feel if they actually caused a crash. And that's really, really important. And I don't want to shy away from that. Okay, moving on. Assumptions. Right, well, look, let's not assume young people, as I think said earlier, drive. Let's not assume they even want to drive. And I think doing so helps support a sense of driving as, if we do support that, as somehow glamorous, aspirational. I'm being a bit provocative here. It's a bit fun. Jump in the car, whiz around the block. But actually undermines the ability of young people, if we do emphasize driving, to choose not to drive. We need to present a balanced approach. And that does link into sustainability. Linking road safety to health and sustainability. I guess to underline the wider social importance of the topic, help young people feel empowered to make a difference in their everyday choices using roads. And if you spotted our theme for Road Safety Week last year, hashtag drive less, live more, it was exactly all about that. Driving is not the be-all and end-all, and ought not to be, and I've got a 20-year-old, ought not to be the first thing that my 20-year-old wants to do, and as it happened, it wasn't. But most of her mates were jumping into vehicles at 17 because that was the thing to do. So tone and message about sustainability for us is absolutely critical. Now, finally, that's some of the stuff that we've got on our website in terms of assisting getting the messages across. Do have, I'm sure you already have a good snoop around the website. It's full of content. Sometimes, there's too much content. I'm the first to say that, but please, by all means, have a snoop around that website. The only other thing, Dave, before I hand back to you, that I wanted to say is that running alongside this, and it's a complementary activity, and I have to say it's a happy coincidence is that we are looking again at how we send out campaign messages to and for young people. Let me be really honest with you again, we've perhaps always in the past, and this is where I came in with this presentation, talked to young people. Some have said we've talked at young people about safe driving, about the bigger, broader issue of sustainability that I've just been talking about. That simply does not work in campaign terms. So we're also conducting a piece of research, Brainbox is the outfit doing it for us, to look into young people's attitudes to driving, but also to look into the attitudes of not driving. And from that, we want to devise a campaign, which will probably not kick off until early next year, that is for, by, and about young people. It's their voice, their lessons, their experiences, their hopes, and their fears. So a new campaign from us, which will have woven throughout the policy call of which we continue to make for a graduated driver licensing system for new drivers. Many of them, of course, happen to be young drivers. That's enough from me for this morning. Thank you very much for taking part in this webinar. I hope you enjoy our next speakers, and I'll hand you back to my colleague Dave Nichols. Thank you and good morning.
Thank you very much, Gary, for that presentation. I forgot to mention at the beginning, if you do have any questions at all during today's webinar, for those of you who haven't attended before, you have a question drop-down box on the right of your screen. So please feel free to use this to ask any questions to our speakers, and I'll give a moment if you have any questions at all for Gary, then do please send your questions to us and I can put them to him. Alternatively, we will email you all the slides and information at the close of today's webinar. So any questions you have or queries or even inputs, we're always open to suggestions. As Gary said, a lot of you are already in this field and working closely with this important group. So anything we can learn from yourselves as well as you learning from us is always much appreciated. I think Gary's presentation there leads us nicely onto our next speaker, who I will pass on to in a moment, Jeremy Williamson, who wears many hats. I'm sure he will tell you in a moment, but one of them being a watch manager for Merseyside Fire and Rescue Service. Jeremy's been a big supporter of Brake for a number of years and has been involved with our Road Safety Week that we hold every year, and I think he's going to talk now about the work that he's been doing with young people, why he got involved, and how he goes out and talks to them. And I think Gary's points that he raised in his presentation about being more interactive and engaging, Jeremy has addressed through the work that he does and the presentations he does out in schools. So hopefully you can hear me, Jeremy, and I'll hand over to you to talk through your presentation. Thank you.
Yes, hello Dave, thanks for inviting me, and hello to everyone else listening. If you can hear me okay. Okay, practical approach to engaging young people. The previous speaker there made some excellent points which I'll go on to shortly. So firstly, about myself, how did I start, how did I get involved in road safety and Brake? Wow. Yeah, I was celebrating in inverted commas, shall we say, A-level results time, and my friends and I decided it would be an excellent time to go away together and have some fun at the end of our A-levels. About a week before we were due to go, I was asked, well, I received a job offer that wanted a pretty much immediate start, so I had a decision to make whether to go away with the guys and let our hair down a bit, or start this job anyway. I chose the job because I thought there's always another time to go away and have some fun with the chaps. So I pulled out of that journey and started the job. 31st of August, I found out that my 3 of the 4 chaps that went were actually killed in a road traffic collision. I'd grown up with all the chaps, and one of them being you know, a day older than myself, so we'd gone right through everything together. So that was a pretty devastating summer holiday, really, and it was quite a tough thing to go to funerals of 3 of your best friends on consecutive days, not least of all when one of those days is their birthday and your birthday. So a real slamming introduction to the devastation of these incidents that we have, road traffic collisions. So anyway, on we moved, and why road safety? I always wanted to do something to give back and try and influence, try and make some sense of what had happened when we were 18, 19. So I ended up finding myself, I needed to do a job that was interesting, varied, challenging, helping people, exciting, because I could not sit at a desk day in, day out looking at a computer screen to save my life. So the fire service seemed a really good fit for myself, so I was fortunate to get involved in that and be accepted into the fire service, fire and rescue service as we call it now. So yes, obviously, as you know, fire service and local authorities do quite a bit of work with young people. So I sort of naturally migrated towards the road safety side of things. Enjoyed working with young people, and just really wanted to give back and sort of get involved in areas where I can work with young people and have some positive influence. So that was my approach, really, of how I first moved on into that area. I think we're ready for the next slide there, Dave. Thank you very much. That's great. Dave selected a lovely quote there, and it was just a thought that popped into my head. I didn't really put much. It was just a natural reaction. So I said that I decided if I could save one person from going through what I had, or could cause one person to change their attitudes towards driving, then I should do everything possible to do so. One thing I should have probably told you a couple of minutes ago, 10 years after losing my 3 best friends, I was actually at work in the fire service one day and received a phone call, and it was actually the police from my parents' house. And I remember looking at the caller ID and wondering why a policeman was ringing me from my mum and dad's house, because it just said mum and dad on the phone, and then, hello, this is Constable so-and-so from Cheshire Police. And my brother was actually killed in a road traffic collision as well, so this really compounded my passion into road safety and seeing what we can do to improve outcomes. So at work, my boss approached me and said, look, there's a common opportunity here for Borough Council's road safety team. How would you feel about helping out with that? Because we know you do a lot on a station-based level out working with schools and colleges. So I thought, yeah, that's great. So that was just initially a sort of suck it and see, see how we get on, partnering with other agencies. I'm pleased to say that actually turned into a sort of 3 or 4 year secondment. It was initially just that short term, but they seem to like what I do and got some great outcomes. So that developed it into extension after extension, really. So as Dave said, I sort of wear a few different hats, really. So what I did when I went into this role with the council, I thought, well, okay, I won't turn up and tell them the baby's ugly. Basically, I'll sit there and I'll go out into the schools with them, and I'll just sit at the back of the classrooms and see what's going on and see what we can change. And the previous speaker there, mentioned about PowerPoint, and I agree pretty much with everything they said. I think it's a fabulous tool. I think it's massively misused. That to me is the issue. There's nothing wrong with PowerPoint. I think it's more an application thing of how it's applied. So I sat there and I could see some very talented and passionate individuals about road safety. However, the content, you know, left a little to be desired and hadn't been refreshed in quite some time. So I thought, right, okay, I'll start here with a blank sheet of paper and see what we need to do. So I wrote my own presentations, and it was very much you know, a day-by-day thing, going into schools and colleges, seeing what worked, what didn't, and you know, cobbled it all together with help from some colleagues in the police, etc. And went into schools and colleges, and what I did was have a look at the local figures, if you like, from which we can do it in the council. You can look at an area and see how many road traffic collisions they've had and time of day, all the statistics there. So we sort of thought, okay, which schools have been affected by, or which employers even have been affected with fatalities or road traffic collisions of young people. So we sort of targeted our interventions that way. One of the first interventions I did was at a school on the Wirral, and I was really touched that the parents of a young boy who'd literally weeks before been killed in a road traffic collision on his way home from school with a few of his friends in the car, sort of insisted to the school that they came along. So the school said to me, "Did you mind?" I said, "Not at all now." I said, "But you know, I won't be able to taper the presentation, as it were, to you know, they'll just have to. You know, I'm not prepared to change it because I think it basically takes away something from the students. So if they're happy to sit at the back and etc., then that's fine." So they were okay, yeah. They made that clear to the parents, and I was absolutely humbled at the end when they came up to me and told me the story and what they thought of the sessions, and so much so they actually wrote to their MP and the Transport Minister, I think it was Mike Penning at the time, insisting that what I set up was made part of the curriculum. So that was a really nice touch. Yeah, so what we did as well, we've got a crashed car. From an insurance company, we got the okay. We got the okay from a family that, you know, whose son had been killed in the car. Something the previous speaker also mentioned was keeping things local. When I do a presentation, I don't just go on YouTube and select some footage or videos or photos or whatever and go, this could happen to you, because with young people it will never happen to them until it does. So we can't be patronising and just, you know, put stuff up there that they can access themselves. So there's photos here of the crash cards recovered from Merseyside's roads. It's not being set up. It is a genuine recovered crash car that did have a fatality. So the way we run the sessions, it's normally myself and a member of the council's road safety team and a member of Merseyside Police turn up. I tend not to wear uniform unless I'm specifically asked to, because for a number of reasons really. I think, you know, I think a uniform standing at the front of class and talking to people can in some places be cause people to switch off, so I tend not to do that. Yeah, so what we do, we set up the car. If you see the bottom right kind of Heineken photo there, and you can just see a bottle of water poking out from under the seat, and we load the car with what we call props, for want of a better term. So we have a mobile phone in there, CD, an iPod, alcohol, cans of energy drinks, and all these things, and we look at what could be the causation factors. So going back to our friend PowerPoint, we probably do about 3 or 4 minutes of PowerPoint at the very beginning, just to set out how we're gonna run the day. The rest of the session, which we tailor to, you know, the length of whatever the lesson length is at that particular venue. Most vary from 40 minutes to an hour, so 40, 50 or 60 minutes depending, and we let them know, the students, what we're going to be doing, and to keep it fresh and interactive, we basically say, look, you tell us what's happened, we'll just lead you out there. We're going to look around the vehicle and look at what you write a report for me on what happened. So I'd like to know how many people were in the vehicle, what their injuries might have been, what speed, what time of day or night, who was wearing a seatbelt, who wasn't, what were the likely injuries, all these things, and we get them to split into small groups, as you can see in the top right photo there, and then we come in back to the classroom and discuss what their findings, and at the very end, what we do is tell them the actual story and see how close they got. So yeah, if I was to give advice on how to tailor one of these sessions, I'd say go and speak to the school or college, and agree that the length of time that you need. Be prepared here to be flexible, and when you're speaking with the students, don't assume they're all drivers. So I mean, passengers as well. If they're not a driver, then they'll be put off if you say, okay, how many people are drivers here, and only 3 or 4 put their hands up, because the rest of them are inevitably passengers going in and out and about with those people. So you've got the audience there straight away. So, and also visualise how can we engage with these people, what will sort of strike a chord with them. If I start reading off stats of how many thousand people are killed or seriously injured every year, then it's probably not going to be the most thrilling session someone's attended. So what I tend to do is say, okay, how many people do you think are killed or seriously injured in your age group every year? And get some people to shout out figures, and I say, okay, well, I put it another way. If I was to take this school and college and the one down the road and the other 2 that they know in that local area, and say, that's about 4,500 people. That's how many of your age group are killed or seriously injured every year on Britain's roads, and that gives them a visual reference there, of how, of what that number looks like, because it's easy to sit there and shout out 10,000, 3,000, 4,000, but if we visualise that's a concept that I find works very well. And coping strategies, how can we avoid being affected by these things? Well, what can we do to get out of a vehicle if someone's driving too fast? Is a boyfriend showing off, driving too fast, trying to make his girlfriend scream? Is he likely to slow down the louder he screams? I'd suggest not. She screams, I'd suggest not. I'd suggest that perhaps if she were to say, do you know what, I'm going to vomit all over your car any second now, that will cause him to pull over and slow down and she can get out. If she was to say, oh, I really need the loo and I'm about to, let go here, if you don't pull over and let me run behind that bush, get out of the vehicle and ring mum or dad, or ask mum and dad to leave £20 in a vase in the hallway. So if you ever can't get home, you can always, and you've got no money, you can still get a taxi home. You haven't got to wake mum and dad up. So coping strategies and putting into real life situations, I've found works really, really well indeed. Yeah, any photo I use or footage is from local roads. Now, if you work in partnership with councils, fire, police, anything like that, then you will have photographs of road traffic collision scenes. Obviously, steer clear of ones with shocking images. There used to be a school of thought many years ago that if they sent people like me or policemen into schools and showed horrific images of what could happen, that suddenly young people would be shocked into behaving differently. I can categorically tell you that doesn't work. It's not something I believe in, for a number of reasons. Quite often video games these days are more graphic than some of the things I see out on the roads, and there's a certain sense of desensitisation amongst young people. There's the "it'll never happen to me," which we've all been guilty of, more so when we're younger, I'm sure. So that just doesn't work. So be careful of the images you show. Shock tactics are not really something I'd recommend at all. Have I changed the talks much over the years? Not massively. Not massively. I might, for sensitivity reasons, I might change some of the photographs if there's been, or if if there's been new findings, new research, but no, not massively. We don't change the presentation, other than alter the length of it to suit the sessions. When I first started working with this age group, I thought this is going to be quite a challenge, and it's going to be hard to engage with. And I found that as long as we're not patronising, we can have a bit of a laugh. But I think involvement is the key here. So I would certainly suggest involving the students and not just sitting them down. So that could be one of the things we do is a field impairment test, where we use a line on the floor, some tape if you've got it, and then some beer goggles, which most local authorities have, which are some glasses that you put on that affect your vision and give you a sort of simulation of what it's like to have a couple of drinks and then try and walk in a straight line. So all these things, it's about putting them into real life situations. So it's no good just saying, oh, don't drink and drive, because you might have a crash. It doesn't really register. So we go in depth into drink driving, drug driving, all these factors. If you ask people how much can you have to drink before you drive, you'll get a real range of answers: 2 units and 2 pints or a bottle of wine, whatever it may be. But what I normally do is with the first person that says, yeah, it's 2 units, I say, that's brilliant, well done, here's a pen, come and draw me a unit. And that will sort of expose that none of us really know what a unit of alcohol is, or none of us can adequately explain it. So how we expect young people to do so is probably not the best thing. So yeah, I think it's just engaging, not being patronising, give them real life scenarios, show them footage of roads or photographs, etc., that they will be familiar with, suggest the coping strategies. I mean, being a father of 3 teenage daughters, mine are well drilled in things to say to get out of a car if someone is driving unsafe. I'd much rather have a phone call at 3 in the morning from one of them saying, can you come and pick me up, Dad, from so and so. I didn't want to get in the car with Jason. He was, he'd had a drink or whatever. I'm more than happy to have that phone call every day of the week, and I don't think you'll find many parents in the land that wouldn't have that. Or like I said, just agree a safe place in the house to leave some money, and if they have to get a cab home because they didn't feel safe getting in the car, then I'm more than happy to leave £20–30 in a vase or something somewhere. So in summary, really, it's visualisation for them, make it interactive, get them to sort of lead on some of the things. Like I say, if you're fortunate to work with local authorities that have crash cars, quite a number of them do now, well, don't just park it there and go, look, that could happen to you. Try and get them to get involved in the situation, in the scenarios, and you'll get a much more realistic feedback of what what their thoughts are and how we can affect that. So thank you very much indeed for listening. I hope some of what I've said has been of some use, and I hope the volume's okay on this webinar. It's been a pleasure. Thank you very much, Dave, and thank you to the other speakers.
Thank you very much, Jeremy, for your presentation there. That's fantastic to have your input and to pull out some of the points that Gary mentioned as well. As I mentioned before, if you do have any questions at all for Jeremy, then please do type them into question panel box, and I can put them to him. Likewise, if you have any contact at the end, then get in touch with Break and we can pass on any information to Jeremy, and I know he's always happy to share any advice or knowledge that he's had for this. I know we've had a question come in saying about can we volunteer when organising a campaign in a school? Is there a timetable, etc.? I will send information at the end of this webinar about our events and what we're doing, but we do have resources on our website on organising campaigns and going into schools. A lot of our time's taken up with road safety professionals getting in touch with us saying that a school or college has asked them to go in and do a talk. Have we got anything for them? we range with what resources and what we've got, because we rely on funding to try and produce resources, and as Gary highlighted, our report has highlighted that we will be hopefully investing in new resources and interactive tools. But the best thing really is sharing best practice stories like Jeremy's and what other people are actually doing successful out there. But we also have key information on our website about areas of discussions, so through the different key stage areas in the UK, and also globally as well, looking at different age groups. So obviously how you communicate and what messages you're going to get across to a 7-year-old is going to be different to a 17-year-old. So it's always thinking about your audience and how you get that across. But thank you very much, Jeremy, for your time and your presentation, and thank you for all the work that he's doing, and with his colleagues at the Fire Service Police and Emergency Services, going out into these schools and colleges and communicating. So slightly different, going on to different perspective here as well. I'm going to pass you on to Anna, who details there on the screen and various ways that she's been involved. So this should hopefully give you information about what she's going to talk about, and I don't know why why it's moved on there, so I will go back.
That's
and
right.
Apologies for that. There we go.
Okay.
So thanks very much, and I'll hand over to you.
Thanks a lot. My name is Anna. I work for 20's Plenty for Us. We're a campaign group that campaign on 20 mile an hour limit. So yeah, next slide. I've written a book about traffic reduction. I'm organising a new campaign on Vision Zero. I've also been a teacher and worked on behaviour change with young people. And I've been a City of York councillor. So 20's Plenty for Us is a national voluntary organisation supporting people who want slower road speeds, and you probably realise that going slower is one of the biggest messages we can give young people about being safe. So yeah, next slide. We can look at the growth of 20's Plenty. We've got over 300 local branches. There's 15.5 million people who've got this policy agreed. Cardiff was the latest place to announce it in end of February. My boss is Rod King, who's got an MBE in road safety, and I've been campaign manager for nearly 6 years. And the map shows various branches we've got and where 20 is already the local road speed for most roads. So I have the next slide. The way we work is that we feel that the key point is that roads will never be safe if they're 30 miles per hour. You can't expect child-friendly environments, and it'll always deter physical activity. So we've got to have slower road speeds, otherwise the drivers are basically being greedy. And yeah, we can have the next slide. So we've got to reduce danger at source rather than blaming victims if we want traffic reduction, because otherwise it's only the fit or brave who will be willing to go into streets that are 30 miles an hour. I don't actually believe it's all that ethical to recommend mixing particularly novice cyclists with 30 mile an hour traffic, and the Dutch don't think so either, and most of the largest UK authorities have rejected 30. Over 20 of the biggest 40 authorities have said that 30 is not fit for purpose. And next slide. So there are these realisations in communities that basically inappropriate vehicle speed is causing a lot of fear. It's more disbenefit than benefit. We can go on to thinking about why that makes a difference. Speed's the main factor in collision avoidance. It's not that speed causes collisions, but it doesn't allow them to be avoided. I mean, for instance, on stopping distance, 20 miles an hour, the stopping distance is half that of 30 miles an hour. It's 3 car lengths instead of 6. You also get many other benefits. It's safer, more attractive, quieter, it's better for pollution and so on. Next slide. We're moving on to thinking about some pilot results, just because I wanted to prove to you that 20 miles an hour is very popular. In Edinburgh it was 68% wanted it before and 79% after, so this is not something we're forcing upon people. They want it already. Considering cycling to be unsafe fell from 26% to 18%, so more people were cycling and willing to cycle. Children cycling to school trebled. from older primary age school children, it went up by a factor of 7, and people were allowing their children to play out more in the streets. Half as many people allowed their children to play out, and you actually had some traffic reduction. Car trips fell by 3%, and Edinburgh have decided to roll out 20 mile an hour across the city for 80% of roads, including shopping areas. So next slide. You basically need to sell active travel on the basis of health. I mean, when I was looking at my book, traffic reduction book called Cutting Your Car Use, the major thing that people want to do when they're deciding whether to drive less is they want to be healthier, and it beats all other motivational messages like it's cheaper, more ecologically, possibly even quicker. But the problem is people are afraid of cycling, walking, injuries, or maybe stranger danger too. So we have to overcome fear if we want the healthy activity gains. So next slide. This is important particularly for young people who's often they're not being allowed out because their parents are scared. Now, Stephen Stradling goes on about lapses, errors and violations in driver behaviour. We know that male drivers are higher violators compared to female, and particularly male drivers aged 17 to 25. And it's partly that, that at that age the brain chemistry is changing and people are but of course they're very hard to reach within road safety education since they aren't often listening. I mean, now we can go into schools and talented people like Jeremy can get their attention, but it's perhaps more cost effective if you're going to bring in a 20 mile an hour campaign to get to those people who would comply and be pacer vehicles to slow everybody else down, like parents or people who would lose their job. Like taxi drivers, council drivers, bus drivers, anybody whose job would be at the risk if they were to be found driving over 20. And then actually that does force the other traffic to go slower. And what works is local people supporting 20 mile an hour, young girls given freedom. It's particularly images of children that seem to help 20 mile an hour campaigns. SOMO found this out. The same messages work on all groups of the population, as far as I understand. You have to lead with it's healthier, safer, better for all, and it's got to be real people out on real local streets having fun. And videos in particular are very successful for this. So Bristol's poster, for instance, has these 2 young girls. I mean, who wouldn't want them to be safe on their street? And it goes a little bit slower, a whole lot better, which I think is a great slogan. The experts of marketing, we'll have the next slide, is SOMOs, and they've looked at various different messages. We can tell people that 20 miles an hour is 7 times less likely to kill. It's better for those outside cars. The air is cleaner, although that's not an immediate obvious message. We have to do some myth busting about that. If you look at braking distance, it can get a bit technical. The fact that it doesn't slow down overall journey times is a bit counterintuitive, but it's true. So you can make the point that going a bit slower really doesn't make a difference in terms of how quickly you'll get to the end destination. So, but really it's got to be healthier. And social proof is very important for this. It's about changing behaviour if they think other people are doing it too. So the message has to be most people your age, like you, in your city or place, are driving at 20 miles an hour because it's healthier. And it's better coming from an authentic voice, somebody they know, somebody they relate to. Like in Liverpool, they've done lots of work with football clubs, and in Manchester they give £200 grants to community groups, anybody doing a 20 mile an hour limit, so that the local people they already know are putting on an event rather than somebody from the council in uniform who may not be somebody that local people would listen to as well as their neighbours. So next slide is about, this is a photo of, I think it's Everton. You know, actually road signs are not blue surrounds, they're red surrounds, but we've got the colour of the club, and it's local heroes supporting 20 that people will listen to. Next slide, with the SOMO company did it also with the other team in Liverpool. If we move on, lots of the work was done with photos and Twitter and shareable images on Facebook, like if you agree, share if it's plenty. The videos are very successful in marketing. We'll move on. It's better to do infographics than text. we want to build compliance, the willingness to drive slower rather than enforcement, which is about catching people driving too fast. So the question mark there in marketing terms is anything shareable. It's about trying to reach people through their own co-production marketing methods, which is sharing on their own Facebook and Twitter and Pinterest walls and so on. Next one. So I plug Somo, who are the best company doing this. They get people out on bikes with the 20-mile-an-hour logos on and then share those images through not just the paper, but loads of other people's social networks, Twitter and so on. So if we move on, I've just got lots of pictures coming. So we can flick through quite quickly. It's about the post office supporting 20 and the police supporting it. It's got people supporting it by writing on Christmas troves, the local community. This banner is full of people putting their handprint on, saying what they want to and signing it themselves. So it's not just a picture, it's actually a pledge wall. They got local community groups to do some yarn bombing, which is knitting 20-mile-an-hour signs that were then put up in a park, and so a bit of artwork to promote 20. And we'll move on to the next slide. They even had a racing driver come and promote 20 miles an hour. This particular racing driver had a terrible history in his own family of road crashes, and yeah, it's actually about the message is about all these young children being on little cars that are going 20, and yeah, you just need to have a lot of imagination to do this policy. So next slide, we've got the Somo, who is run by a lady called Nicola Wass. They've got a pack about resources and activity with 3 years of what they've done in Liverpool and other places where they've worked. And yeah, I promote their toolkit, which costs about £5 because they're the marketing experts on this. Now, if we go on to the next slide, if you do want 20 miles an hour to be the national road speed or for your area, I know there's people from all around the country who perhaps they don't yet have 20 miles an hour. Let me go back one slide. Yeah, follow 20's Plenty for us on Twitter. Look at our website, 20splenty.org. It only costs £3 per head now with repeater signs every 100 metres on roads to bring in 20 miles an hour where you live. But obviously if we could get a national 20 mile an hour, that would be much more cheap. It would be cost effective, clearer. It would set community safety commitment to everybody, and the marketing would be able to be done by the government rather than local authorities. Currently what's happening is there's a patchwork of local authorities who've done it here and there. Now we have got 9 of the inner London 11 authorities to agree to it, but of course people move between boroughs, people move between local authorities. It's not good enough for one place to have it and then the next neighbouring place not to have it, because that's confusing for drivers. It's better than no 20, but really we're trying to move forward. We've got 15.5 million people whose authorities have agreed 20, and I'm very happy to help you to get your authority to do it too, and do contact me. And thanks for listening.
Thank you very much, Anna, for that whistle-stop tour of 20's Plenty and the work you've done. With regards to, you mentioned there about young people, and obviously when we talk, I guess we're talking in terms of road safety initiatives. I know it's often anyone under 25, but in particular for the younger group, I guess, have you noticed, or is there a difference between, say, your primary school age children who obviously are still very much walking and cycling and want to be able to get to school safer and are very keen to promote to their parents, look, drive slower and 20 mile an hour can help me? Does there seem to be an age where that changes when they get, 15, 16, 17, when they're looking at driving, and actually their attitudes change? Or do you find actually you're getting teenagers as well who are quite intrigued?
I think the vision research that says that children cannot even judge speeds until they're 12, you do often get the pester effect of children saying to their parents it's too fast, but I don't actually think that anybody is very good at judging road speeds from standing at the side of the road, unless people are massively going over the road speed limit. In terms of education on driver behaviour to young people, as far as I understand, the more education in schools, actually, in some ways, the worst result in terms of the World Health Organization research that says the interventions on teaching young people about driving means they drive earlier and have more crashes. So my particular, I mean, I know that's very controversial to say, that road safety education is not really at children is where it's at. It should be at drivers. The drivers are causing the danger rather than the children. So I would, if I was in charge, I would very much move the education towards the older age groups, rather than trying to persuade young, doing any primary age education, if it was up to me.
Yeah, no, definitely, and some interesting points there. We had another question come in as well from, apologies if I do pronounce this wrong, but Jurley Greinberg says they had one local person who spread the word of driving safely, but didn't do it themselves. So obviously we're caught out in the public of not driving safely. Their marketing campaign fell down because of that. People obviously said, why should we listen to you if you're not a hero yourself? Have you had any kind of experience of that? But I guess whether you've had experience of that, or also I guess young people can, in particular, can set the examples themselves, can't they, by actively following example. It's where peer pressure can work in a positive way as well.
Whether somebody is a driver or not, I think might affect people's willingness to listen. I understand that. I'm a non-driver myself, partly because I was very badly injured as a cyclist in my 20s, and but I've written a book about traffic reduction that I don't think is any less interesting to read just because I don't tend to be a driver myself. I do have a license. I have driven in the past. In terms of role models, yeah, I think people do need to have local voices, local people that they look up to, giving the messages, rather than somebody who is faceless, nameless from the council or from an agency that, of course, supports road safety. And these messages are much better coming from peer groups. And the difficulty is, of course, that that involves a lot of retraining within each community that you want to make a message to. And so it depends. I don't really know what the cost effectiveness of that, but certainly, like Somo did with the football clubs, if local football stars or people that young people look up to are photographed with 20-mile-an-hour signs, I think that does impact them and does make them think, oh, well, if he supports it or if she supports it, then maybe I will.
Definitely, yes, and that's something that we look towards as well. And it's like you say, that's very those positive role models are very important. So whether it is people like Jeremy and that going out into these schools and kind of talking, or young people themselves, we have very good experiences of, as Gary alluded to, of young people taking the case for not driving themselves, so actually campaigning, going to MPs and campaigning for safer roads. So it's let's not forget how important this age group are in kind of decision makers, and they're our future as well, aren't they? Really, they're going to be our future 20s plenty members, and our future road safety officers at councils, our future fire officers, our future teachers, whatever roles they're going to take. So yeah,
I do
really
increasingly find young people are contacting the campaign and going, I want this for my school. And what I'm saying is, well, you don't want it just for the 100 metres around your school. What you want it is for your town or city. Yeah. And they go, oh, yes, that's right. And it makes them think big.
Yeah, definitely, that's it. I guess people are very kind of can be very selfish in terms of I want it in my immediate area because that benefits me. Whereas, like you say, that widespread initiative and the call to change the default speed limit as well. So, thank you very much, Anna, for your day, and thank you, Jeremy, as well for your presentation, and Gary earlier. Thank you very much for everybody for attending today's webinar. I hope you have found the points useful, and there's some tips there for engaging young people with your initiatives. As I say, we are always keen to hear the work that you're doing out in your communities, both in the UK and globally, so please do get in touch and let us know. I will share these slides and presentation with you later on today, and any advice that we can give, then don't hesitate to get in touch. But thank you very much for your time. Thank you to our speakers, and thank you very much to the Department for Transport for allowing us to run these series of webinars that we've had over the past year. This is the last in a series of 4 that we've run, so I will share the links for the other 3 webinars if you've not been able to attend those. But thank you very much, and I hope you have a good rest of the day. Take care.